our program and introduce the speaker, please join me in reciting Al-Fatiha and recite it loud so it resonates all through the center. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
I am really pleased to introduce Dr. Chaudhary. I have known Dr. Chaudhary since the 70s when after his training, he started his practice of internal medicine on the east side at St. Charles Hospital. Over the period of 4 or almost 5 decades, he has made himself a well-known civic and medical leader. On the civic side, he has been active in the Rotary Club and has been president of the Toledo Rotary Club. Incidentally, Toledo Rotary Club is one of the largest in Toledo, perhaps also in Ohio. It's a very large group which meet every week on Monday, and they have a lot of philanthropic work and mission work too around the world. And Dr. Chaudhary led that organization, Rotary Club of Toledo. On the medical side, he has done everything. He has been chief of staff of St. Charles Hospital. He was the chief medical officer at St. Charles Hospital. He was co-director of the residency program in family practice. He established a Oregon clinic, a group of internal medicine physicians, and that still thrives. Although he is semi-retired, but his legacy of Oregon Clinic and his services to St. Charles and greater Toledo community still endure. So it's an honor and pleasure to introduce Riaz Chaudhary. He's going to talk about how to live a virtuous life. Riaz?
Thank you. I'm really. Let me know if it's too loud or something.
I don't think it's on yet.
No, it's not on.
It is not loud at all.
First of all, I'm pleased. I've been, first of all, a member of this Islamic Center since inception. And I was new in practice, and Amjad invites 5, 6, or 10 of us to his house. And we signed some kind of pledge for donation, and that was the initial sort of planning for the Islamic Center. So I feel sort of attached to the place itself. I may not come here after, but when I come, it lasts for me for a long time. Like a long-acting medication, we call it amiodarone, which has like a 3 months half-life, it stays in your system for 3 months. So any visit to the mosque is really, for me, is invigorating. I enjoy being here, just meeting people, and taking a time off from usual routine. I chose this topic. I thought I've got to get out of my comfort zone. And I want to attribute this talk to my father, who was a really very civil, sensitive, and caring person, and a Persian and Arabic scholar. I'm sort of influenced by him. So it's sort of my attempt to take this topic is a tribute to my dad. So what did he do for us? And we were a large family, you would say. 8 sons, 5 daughters, and he took over his eldest son's family as well. So there's a huge number of people, Luckily, he had 2 wives to have those 13 children. So we are a very special kind of family. We all grew up together in one house. So that's my brief background. First of all, I thought I'll stick to my, what we call a comfort zone. I want all of you to live a long and healthy life. And after like almost in 3 months, it'll be 47 years that I've been in practice. And before that, of course, I was in training for 4 or 5 years. So really, as a person, you need to simple 4 or 5 things you need to focus. And if you focus on them and make it part of your everyday life, I think you can live a longer life than what you expect to do today. So the first one is simple suggestion I have for all of you is that you really want to know your systolic blood pressure. And it should always be below 130 or below. And you can make it a routine. Buy a blood pressure cuff once a week, twice a week. Like I check every morning myself for my cup of coffee, what my blood pressure is. So it becomes a routine. Most of the survival studies have been done on blood pressure, systolic blood pressure. And Pickering was a British scientist who had a huge paper on it. It's the absolute number that matters. If somebody's blood pressure is 130, he's worse off than the person who is 125. Even now, recent studies also sort of suggest that. So that's one suggestion for you. Second suggestion is that fasting blood sugar, like after 8 hours fast, should be below 110. If your sugar is 115, 120, 125, that has an effect on your health. And then what it really means is you have less chance of becoming a diabetic if you have that. If your blood sugar is above 110, even 100 even, purists call it even above 100. But anyway, 110 is an easy number to remember. Then, we call it 3-month sugar, we call A1C. And if that is between 5.75 to 6.4, you call it pre-diabetic. And it's important to know that you're pre-diabetic because you have 5 to 10% chance of becoming a diabetic every year. So there's a big chance. Then you can prevent it in many ways. I won't go into that. Weight loss, exercise, some medications we use.
Yes, can you speak in the microphone?
Yes, okay. And the third point is that low density lipoproteins. I'm sure all of you read about cholesterol. But the real cholesterol which confers the risk on a person is the low density lipoprotein. The idea is to have it 120 and below. If you have no history of heart attacks, no history of strokes, you're an ordinary person, a healthy person, that is your goal. But if you have stroke or a heart attack, then you want this called low density lipoproteins, less than 70, or even below even sometimes. So at any time, you want to know your fasting blood sugar, your systolic blood pressure, and your LDL. So that's the third suggestion I have for you. And the last one is, other one is a body mass index. Body mass index is a calculation, you take your weight in kilograms and divide it by your height squared in meters. Your height doesn't change that much. So you figure out your height in meters and multiply, and like mine is 2.95. So all I have to know is, what my weight in kilograms. The pounds divided by 2.2 gives you kilograms. So those kilograms divided by that square you have figured out about your height give you your body mass index. So the idea is to have a body mass index below 25 is possible. But we want to provide some room for socialization, eating, this, that. you can be between 25 to 28, but it should never ever be more than 30. If it's more than 30, that you're high risk for multiple diseases, of course, strokes, heart attacks, some cancers, so all kind of complications you get in your life. And of course, smoking cessation is obvious. I won't spend any time on it. And the last one, which is really confusing for a lot of people, is exercise. And after reading about it, for all those years and advising my patients and friends as well, the simplest thing is you need to exercise 150 minutes a week. It has to be aerobic. The duration matters, the speed doesn't matter. Like if a person walks on the treadmill 3 miles per hour, the next person walks 2.5, their cardiovascular risk, risk of heart attacks and strokes, is the same reduction. So even if you walk at 2 miles per hour, but it has to be continuous. And then there are studies which show that you can do in smaller increments. If you're a busy person, you walk 15 minutes in the morning, 15 in the evening, become 30 minutes. So the advice is official advice for exercises, 150 minutes per week. It can be walking, it can be cycling, biking, swimming. The word aerobic, of course, you understand continuous activity, so your body requires more oxygen. So these are really my simple suggestions, and this will determine your longevity. There's umpteen studies that you live longer and you have less chance of dementia, cardiovascular events. So as my fellow Muslims and members of this mosque, these 5, 6 that I mentioned, make it a routine. When you wake up, you know what day it is, what day it is, what month it is. Same way, you make it a routine that where do you stand in these 4 or 5 things? My wife thinks I'm a little obsessive, but I check my blood pressure each day, keep my BMI below 25, systolic below 130, sugar below that number. I've done that maybe for 10, 15 years. It's sort of way of life for me. So that's the easy part that I'm talking to you about, okay? Which I've done for the last 47 years, advising my patients. The other part is virtues and values in life. And virtues and values really derive mainly from your faith, family, and upbringing. If a person is a religious Muslim or religious Catholic or whatever, a truly religious person with a lot of tolerance, they have certain set of values. But the challenge is when you live this life, you deal with so many different people, you're challenged each day. It's easy for me to say to be civil and sensitive, but if somebody yells at you, you have a natural reaction, you want to respond to them. It's not easy to stay quiet and say nothing. So during my younger years, when I was young, newly married with children, my focus was, I always keep a journal. Like every week I used to, every 2 weeks, every month, I do. So I keep a journal. What challenges do I have? And that really served for me as an outlet. Instead, of course, you talk to friends and confidants, but the journal gives you an opportunity to express yourself. I'm facing this problem, what am I going to do? So when I was younger, my journal reflects that I want to be courageous, I want to be disciplined, I want to have self-confidence. If I start my practice and I don't have self-confidence, I've got 3 kids to raise, I want a confidence that I can raise them, I can feed them, I can house them. And the other is that these are the things I really focus on. And of course, you want financial independence and emotional independence. Financial independence, you want a certain housing, education for your family. And emotional independence is that you are dependent on people, but if somebody is nasty to you one day, let's say one of my sons is rude to me, So does it mean I should go to pieces? No. I should be able to handle it and tolerate it. And then ponder on it for 2 days or 3 days or 4 days, forgive him and move on. So you have to have emotional independence as well. You can love people, but at the same time, you want your own personal self to be independent as a person. But later on, in my 60s and 70s, for the past 10 years, when I write my journal, I really see these 5 virtues. I call them virtues, whether they're virtues or not. Is the definition of virtues different? But I call them virtues. Civility, sensitivity, sensitivity plus stillness, and grit and gravitas. And my abbreviation is CS2G2. That's the abbreviation I use. So civility, in my case, I'm telling you my struggles too. What I'm saying, it took me a long time to be where I am now. I'm 76, in 1 week I'll be 77. So it took me a long journey to reach where I am, and I feel comfortable where I am. That's the main part. Okay. So in my case, in my challenges, I'll give you of course, there are many challenges. But one is the most glaring one is this that which I want to share with you. I was a first-year resident and came to UTMC in Medical College of Ohio in July 1973. I was in training. In those days, the program was that you rotate at Toledo Hospital and you rotate at St. Vincent and UTMC, 3 places we rotated. And I had a 3-month rotation at St. Vincent. That was my 7th, 8th, and 9th month. And whatever it was, because of my background or whatever it was, I was really, first of all, I was very confident, but I was very, very aggressive as well in behaving with people. I am it, I'm the smart guy, I walk in water. So 4 things happened to me in the meantime. That one of my senior residents, he was micromanaging us. He was telling us what to do. So he was my senior resident, and I was a first-year resident. So I was really rude to him. I said, "What do you think you are? Why are you doing this?" And then I was conducting a code one day. I was not in charge of the code, but it was one of the doctors conducting the code. And if you ever seen a code, a lot of people collect there. A huge number of people. Now we have refined it.
Riaz, can you say what the code means?
Yeah, code. Code is CPR code. If a patient is being coded for a cardiac arrest, they call it a code. Code blue, different terms they use. So there was a room full of people, and one of these nurses, she was very anxious, nervous, this, that, and I sort of snapped at her. Is there too many people? You're too nervous. You're making the things worse. Will you be quiet? I was really rude to her. Then, we were in those days, Amjad remembers that there was a lot of discussion about foreign medical graduates, that we are being misused and they give us too many patients in a short period of time. And my fellow residents sort of talked me into become the leaders too. So I became a leader of a group like House of Physicians Association. So this kind of background I had. So once St. Vincent people noticed this young doctor, young resident, he's just due to too many people. So the director of the program of internal medicine and the director of the education, of course I know the names, I won't mention them. They called me for a meeting, and I went there for a meeting, and they had a long letter for me. Those 2 of them, and I'm sitting across the table from them, small round table. And they gave me a very long letter describing these 3 episodes. The way I treated the nurse, the way I treated the senior resident, and I can't stop complaining about the clinic, the schedule, the patient signed. And they were really prepared. They said, this guy is very aggressive. He's going to talk back to us. He's going to create a real issue for us. And when I read the letter, and I realized that, I'm a King Edward Medical College graduate, and I'm married. I have a 6-year-old son, and all this will be over for me, if these guys let me go. So I said, Dr. Chaudhary, you have anything to say? I said, I have nothing to say. None at all. I said nothing. I said, all this is true, but I make a promise that nothing will happen again. Nothing will happen again. And I walked out of the meeting, and then I said, asked myself, should I save this letter? I said no. So I went to the nearest basket and ripped it into pieces and threw it away. From then on, I got a real training in what I call a civility and sensitivity. And some of you have worked with me very closely. I mean, I can work in a hospital for 30 years, and my goal is not to have a single complaint that Dr. Chaudhary was rude. I slip once in a while every couple of years, but that's my goal. And that incident which happened to me as a first-year resident, I keep it in mind. How did I save myself from a catastrophe, and what my approach is to life it is. So really, my civility, I made a cornerstone. A second, sensitivity. Sensitivity is the hardest virtue or hardest thing to achieve. It applies to your everyday life. People from different races, different ethnic backgrounds, different persuasions. How do you behave with them and how you talk? And I do my best. Like a patient is a prisoner since age 12 till age 34, 22 years he has been in and out of prisons. When I see him, I walk into the room. I want him to know, okay, I'm sensitive who he is, and I want to care for him. He will be no different from any other patient I have. His background doesn't matter to me. And then it really reaffirmed, I would say, by my residents, the ones I teach. I've taught maybe 650 doctors since 1997. And they're all in practice for the past, whatever time they are. And anytime they meet me, anytime I come into action with them, they're always thankful. And not a single day I've preached what you should do. I don't give a lecture. This is the first time I'm speaking on these issues either. They have to see what I do. In a medical profession, you say ethics, you can't teach somebody ethics. They have to see you the way you walk in the patient's room, the way you talk to them, the way you talk to the family, the way you finish your visit, they look at your behavior, what you're doing, the way, all these things, they have to learn from that. So I've been very fortunate that I've been able to influence almost 650 physicians who come through Mercy Family Practice Training, St. Vincent Internal Medicine Training as well. And then I went to Amjad and I belong to an association called Association of American Pakistani Physicians. And I went to one of the meetings in 1992, and there's a presentation that you can write to the State Department and sponsor the families from Bosnia. So I came back from the meeting, I don't know where the meeting was, but I came back and I got the papers ready and wrote to the State Department that I want to sponsor 2 families. And they approved it. It's a lot of paperwork, you give your background, this, that. So during Bosnia-Herzegovina war, I was able to sponsor 2 families who came to Toledo in 93, 94. And I want to really thank St. Charles Hospital, St. Charles Hospital, the nurse sisters. I recruited sisters to help me, Sister Teresa and others. And then I recruited Dr. Fick. He was a dentist in town. And Aziza and Aziz and Nurjan, they helped. So with their help, we were able to look after these two families, house them, food, this, that, and eventually they became independent. They're still in touch with me. So that really, all this sensitivity enabled me to help those families. In terms of life in general, I read about Andy Grove, 25, 30, 15, 20 years ago. And Andy Grove was a founder of Intel. And when he retired, it was very difficult for him to retire. And when he did, he said in a big interview in New York Times, he said, my purpose for the rest of my life is that this country has been good to me and loving, and I've prospered here. So my goal is to leave this country a better place than what I found it. So really, I have tried my best. This is one of my motto is that I've been so fortunate. I've raised my family here, called my brother, my brother, my sister. So what can I do for this country to make this a better place? But what it was when I came here. So that's one of them. So in that context, I joined to get my name around Oregon area. I joined Oregon Chamber of Commerce soon after starting practice. I went to most of their meetings, and I was fortunate that I served as their president in 1985 and 86. So that really helped me a lot because almost all businessmen in Oregon knew me. And it gives you like a community responsibility. If I see a patient, even if I don't like the patient, I'm happy. I cannot be rude and tough with them. Okay? I know so many people in the city of Oregon. They'll say, "Oh, Dr. Chaudhary did this to me." So it gave me like a community kind of way feeling. I want to be a good person because I belong to this community, and the whole community knows me. So I want to set an example. Civic engagement. And I'm just graciously mentioned my what I call a Rotary Club involvement. I'm going to have a sip of water. I joined Rotary Club in 1995. Lee Welton proposed me to join that. And as I said, in the handout, I say what the Rotary Club does for you. We call it 4-way test. And of the things we think, we do and say, even thinking, you can't even think bad about others. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all? And I can tell you, going there for the past, let's say 15 plus, almost quite a few years I've been there now, 28 years, it sort of grows on you. We start the meeting with this 4-way test. Of course, they have a prayer. And that sort of motivates you to help others. People who are in need, people who are disadvantaged. And luckily, we have a foundation which is almost 3-4 million in corpus, we call it. And every year we give 250,000 to the community, and mostly goes to nonprofits only. And I feel that this is my kind of civic duty to help them do that. And that has been really a big teaching and learning experience for me. The example I think of is that in a medical staff meeting, I'm just mentioned that I had all kind of positions. I'm just the chief of staff as well. If the doctor's meeting is 8, you can come in at 5 after 8 and 6 at 10. Sometimes you're okay. Nobody looks down upon you. But when I was the Rotary president, all these businessmen will be sitting there 5 minutes to 7, like this. And I'm the guy who's supposed to come and chair the meeting. So I also learned to be punctual, I was used to doctor's meeting, come in 5, 10 minutes, this, that, doesn't matter as much. So I learned a lot of things from these guys. They, Chaudhary, what happened to you? So they're ready to go at 8 o'clock on the dot. So that was a good experience. The next thing I'm going to mention is 4 things really. The example is stillness. Great. I'm giving you a few. Stillness is the biggest example I want to give is President Kennedy's handling of Cuban crisis. We call 13 days from October 15th to 28th. President Kennedy got the CIA information that Russians are putting their missiles in Cuba. And his advisors, all the chief of staff, joint chief of staff, and others, military advisors said there's only one way to handle this is to invade Cuba and destroy these missiles. And Kennedy kept on saying there has to be a different way. I mean, we can't just act on it. Normally, if you're rash, you can quickly go to war. But he says that's not the option you want to choose. Because these are 2 nuclear powers, and there'll be a mutual destruction. So sometimes he will leave they were meeting almost continuously, for those 13 days. And when advisors are, arguing and fighting each other, he'll leave the meeting for a short while and go outside and walk in the rose garden. He sort of was seeking solitude so he can make the best decision. And he happened to read, as that's what the story goes, a few months before he read a book, but it's called Guns of August. This is the book by Barbara Tushman about the First World War. And the conclusion of the book was that the overconfident leaders have taken their nations to war too soon. He had read that book. So he said he wants to be patient. So he kept on communicating with the Russians and then started the blockade. He didn't call it blockade, he called it quarantine. And that is 500 miles radius around Cuba, no ships will be able to come. And during that 4 or 5 days of quarantine, a U-2 pilot was shot and some ships were stopped from coming from Russia. But finally, the Russians gave in, multiple communications. And they offered him, on October 26th, Khrushchev wrote a letter to Kennedy that we are willing to remove the missiles if US makes a promise that they will not invade Cuba. And they removed those missiles from Turkey as well, because we had missiles in Turkey as well. So finally, because of his patience, his stillness, his focus, that I don't want to be the person responsible for a nuclear war, in which we may not have the life the way it is on Earth. So he succeeded. In everyday life, the word stillness really, to me, is the peace of mind. You're quiet. Your exterior and interior is the same. And nothing can really disturb you. So he kept the stillness to avoid a huge nuclear war with Russia. So that's the example of stillness. So in everyday life, we raised 4 sons. And those 4 sons, they were all teenagers. The one time there were almost 3 of them teenagers. So it can be tough at times. So my policy was, I'm never going to discipline them during the week. Whatever they do, I'll say, okay, well, I'll see you Sunday. So by Sunday, he's calmed down, I'm calmed down, we sit together, we chat, why did you do this and that? I don't want you to do this in the future. Because if I discipline right there and then it's some confrontation and some arguments, and he may say something which I don't like. Always, all during years of their growing up, that was my policy. You sit back, look at issues, and then act. The next example, I read a book recently. This is really influential. This is what gave me the idea of virtuous life. I read a book it's called Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell, and it's published in 1952. He's a very famous writer. He wrote 1984. He wrote Animal Farm. But this is the only book I've read. I really enjoyed it. And in the introduction, which was like almost like a 32-page introduction, the person who was writing the introduction, one of his graduate students, he was a professor in England. He said George Orwell was a virtuous man. It's different to say somebody has virtues, but it's different to say he was a virtuous man. Virtuous man means you have moral goodness, continuous moral goodness. You have fortitude. Fortitude is really you're emotionally and mentally strong in the face of adversity. When things are going well, everybody can handle them. But anytime when you have adverse situation, how do you react? How do you behave? This is the definition of intelligence as well. The official definition of intelligence is based on your past experience. How do you react to recent events? How do you conduct yourself? So when he went to Spain to cover the Civil War. Spanish Civil War was from 1936 to 39. They were really two groups. One was nationalist, started by the military to overtake the country. Other was they called them Republicans. But among the Republicans were multiple groups. There were unions. There were what they call multiple left-wing organizations. There are different names to them: Marxists, Trotskyites. So instead of writing about the war, he ended up joining them. And he joining a party called POUM, a party for Marxist unification, And then he was on the front for 6 months. He was in trenches. He didn't change maybe for weeks, no change, just food, but no clothing change. Then he came back to Barcelona. His wife was staying in a hotel in Barcelona. And all these Marxist groups started fighting with each other. Killing each other because you are cheating, you're this, you're not with us. But he couldn't even go and stay in a hotel because when he checks in, they will know he's a member of POUM and they will arrest him or kill him. So for 2 weeks, he was sleeping outside like a homeless person in gardens and fountains and all that. But it's the way he handled it. It's the way he conducted himself, and the way he stayed committed. This is a British person. He's already a famous author. And his only goal in life was that he doesn't want the fascists. He believed in socialist democracy and freedom. He doesn't want the fascist people to overtake Spain. That's the only goal he had. And he performed really well. So he showed that he truly has virtues. And this is a very fascinating book to read. And the next one, any questions so far? Is an interactive talk. I don't have have an outline, but I don't have to follow the outline. Anybody has any comments? Say something.
Once you continue, and we'll have a conversation.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. And the other two things I want to mention is that in 2018, they mentioned I want to make sure I watch the time here. 2018, they said the happiest city in Finland. It's a New York Times article. It's called Kauniainen. It's in the outskirts of Helsinki. And population is 9,600. And then the story goes that why is the happiest city on earth? Population is 9,600, but there's no police station in the city. There are like 100 clubs, adult education center, exercise club, singing club, different activities. And there's only one bar in town called Mom's. And the reporter went there at 10:30, 11 p.m. and there were only two people there. So really the point I want to make is that the people in this town of Finland, Kauniainen, they're interacting with each other, they're socializing with each other, they're meeting each other, and they're educating themselves, and they're making themselves a better person. Like our gathering is an example of that. We may talk to each other a little bit, but we don't have to. Just being here is a positive thing for you to be happier and stronger. And then the story goes on that this one guy went to the train station and couldn't find a parking space. So he called the local newspaper. Can you mention in your newspaper that there are no parking spaces at the railway station? And the next day, the local newspaper gave a headline. There are no parking spaces. See how much importance is in giving to interactive life in which people socialize with each other. Same is, I'm sure you have read about the Blue Zone in California, Seventh-day Adventist. They live a long time too. They don't drink alcohol, they socialize with each other, and they live up to maybe 85, 90, 100. They had a neurosurgeon who was 95 and still assisting. They told him, you can't operate anymore, you can assist. And it's a true story. And the last one is that finished the last Sunday, to my good fortune, New York Times gave a big story on the happiest country in the world. They said it's Finland. Happy and so the story goes on to say is that there's a Finnish virtue is called sisu, S-I-S-U. And it's a tribute, it's kind of a trait they have, Finnish people, that in the face of adversity, as they call it, grim determination in the face of adversity. When they feel hardship, it makes them stronger and they overcome. And one of the reasons given is that there are very harsh winters, and then 75% of the country is forest, and people have ample time. Forest is open to the public. There's no rules, regulation, no park system. Anybody can go and use the forest for your peace and quiet.
What's the rate of suicide over there? I thought there was like suicide in one of those countries that was high. You know what the rate of suicide is in Finland?
I don't really know, but they're pretty liberal that way. In terms of their, I don't know really the rate of suicide there. But Swedish countries can be higher. But usually they have what they call a cradle to, thing with socialization, in which you get generous benefits. Like a farmer can send his daughter to learn piano or any kind of instrument. He doesn't have to worry about expenses, money, so it's sort of paid for. They give you a basic stipend to have a good housing, food. Like one guy mentioned that his wife is interested in arts, but she makes arts which doesn't sell that much. So she makes no money, but she's interested in art. But he said she can enjoy that, but the government is supporting it. They have a very generous system that way. But anyway, that's the last one is I want to say the many times here.
We can wrap it up in the conversation.
Yeah, all right. Any other question you have, I'll be glad to answer it. Next one is great is really a passion and perseverance. Doesn't matter what you face in life, you face it with passion and perseverance. The West Point cadets, they 14,000 applicants they have, they select 4,000, then they cut that down to 2,500, they take 1,200. But within 4 years, almost 20% of them leave the program because their skill set doesn't meet the demands of the West Point Academy. And 67 of them leave after the first 8 weeks because the program is called the Beast. It's so severe. They wake up 5:30 and they have to keep on working till 10 p.m. And they challenge them each time. Okay, thank you. Anything else?
We interject a little bit of whatever they call it politics. At one time, President Trump offered to buy Finland. Do you know what was on his mind at that time?
Nobody knows. Yeah, in terms of war, I wanted to mention that the Iraq war and Afghanistan war, these are a hasty decision by a confident leader. And see how much the society has paid, you know. I mean, the US president is the most powerful person on earth. And if any rash judgment is made, how much the society and the countries have to pay for it.
I think that I would disagree with you that the president at the time of Afghanistan intervention and Iraq intervention was confident. I think he was, everything was above his head. Had it not been for the vice president, the other newcomers who were determined to guide the country in one particular direction and shove that decision down his throat, George W. Bush, this would have not happened. So I will not elevate the status of George Bush because I was confident.
But anyway, he felt that you could conquer them. You know, you can, you know what, it has been proven that US as a country can invade anything and take over within a few weeks. But the idea of holding.
But I mean, I just want
Yeah.
to make sure that you and I understand
Yeah.
that George Bush was not a confident leader.
Yeah.
He was ignorant. His advisors at the time, a clique,
Cheney.
Yeah. Rash
a
judgment.
clique.
We call it rash judgment. You made a rash judgment.
They had, no, you're still insisting on that word,
Yeah.
and I disagree with you. What I'm saying is that there was a pre-planned thing that when
Yes.
George Bush becomes president, this group of people, newcomers, they had an agenda, and they found a pliable president, and they shoved that agenda through.
For conspiracy theory, but that's okay. That's fine. I respect that. Some people truly believe in them, and they say they are doing it. You know, they call that deep state. But my belief is that your society, first of all, is so rich. People coming from different religions, different countries, various backgrounds, and eventually everything gets hashed out. And the final product which comes out is a consensus sort of thing. It just happens because the country gives enough ample time. You know, the best time is elections. You know, one election ends, the next begins. That's the best thing for this country, isn't it? So people get their frustrations out.
Riaz, I want to thank you very much. An amazing presentation because I think it really, and I really appreciate your vulnerability. It's not easy to give a presentation like this because it talks about you. So I really respect that and I appreciate it greatly. I just wanted to talk about the adversity piece. So people are well aware of the intelligence quotient, IQ, but there are three others. There's social intelligence, there's emotional intelligence, and then there is, I found out recently, the adversity quotient. So people who are successful, like the Finnish, are people who have a high adversity quotient. So very educational to know.
Thank you. No, the researcher did a grid scale on graduates of West Point, and if you do a psychological testing, you can predict who's going to drop out. And the people who are strong, they stay in. Anything else? Any other questions? I'm glad Aziz and Logan are here. You know, they were my supporters for the Bosnian families.
I have a question.
Sure.
About a year ago, I was diagnosed with diabetes. My A1C was 9.7, and my doctor said you got to take metformin and some other meds, cholesterol and what have you. So I was really panicking, and I cut all my sugars and my carbohydrates, and I managed to drop from 9.7 to 6.1 in 3 months.
That's awesome.
I lost 20 pounds. And then I lost control. Then I started eating my breads and what have you, and then my blood sugar went up to 8.1. My question is, I'm a little bit stubborn when it comes to meds like metformin because they have side effects.
That's true.
How serious is that, not taking those drugs to control my blood pressure, my sugar?
Well, these days we use new kind of drug they call GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide agonist, we call them. And this is the trend, you know, take a small dose of metformin and take these new medications, GLP-1 agonists. There's so many names to them, you know, they can give a once a week injection, you know. Trulicity and
Ozempic.
Ozempic and all the different products they have, semaglutide and liraglutide. So if you take that, you lose weight and you feel better and your A1C comes down.
And the side effects, that's what scares me the most.
No, there are not too many side effects. They slow down your stomach, you just feel nauseated.
Right.
Once in a blue moon, they say they can cause pancreatitis. But majority of the patients we see, after the first few weeks, they get used to it, and you can titrate the dose, and you lose almost 15-20% of your body weight. So you become skinnier. There are like 4 or 5 products like that.
Riaz, I think the point that we need to address with Fadi and with a lot of patients is that they will always talk about, I don't want to take this medication, it has side effects, but I think we need to put diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia on one side, and then our medications on the other. The risks of untreated or treatment just with diet and exercise are much greater of the disease than of the medication.
Yes.
The medications, the side effects of metformin are extremely minimal. It's a tremendous medication. So I think patients don't understand that if they go with untreated diabetes or poorly treated diabetes, the risk of heart attack, stroke, and early death is much higher than taking metformin or Ozempic. So I think you need to understand it in a global way and not just say, oh, I don't want medication, it has side effects. But crossing the street has side effects.
That's how I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
But another part of this formula is what is causing the diabetes. I'm sure there's a study out there, or approach of what is causing it.
Well, there are multiple causes. First is, of course, is the weight gain. Of course, weight is the big factor. Second, genetic too.
Sleep apnea?
Sleep apnea. Anytime you're consistently overweight, and your family history and overweight, the 2 major factors really is the reason for diabetes. Then I tell patients, God has sent you here for, some people need nothing. And if you want to live in this world, God has said you need these medications. That's my way of convincing them.
And Riaz, Islam believes in dua and dawa. You cannot do just
This,
I'm going to pray over it.
I have a couple of verses by the. Go ahead, Amjad.
No, I was just going to make some comments.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
You were going to say
For
something.
the Urdu-speaking people, I want to say that there was a poet called Akbar al-Abadi,
And yes.
1846 to 1921. 1846 to 1921, I'm sorry. And I remember one of his verses. It says कि पुख्ता तबों पर सुनिए पुख्ता तबों पर हवादिस का नहीं होता असर कोसारों में निशाने नक्शे पा मिलता नहीं. It says that if you have a strong-willed, good person, no misfortune has an effect on you. Look at the mountains. On the surface of mountain, when you walk, you don't lose footprints. If you get a strong person, anything really bad comes to me, I say, look, I'm strong and I'm heck with it. I'm here to stay.
This is one of the most serious.
And
No,
and
share a piece of poetry of Akbar al-Abadi. He was known as a humorous poet.
yeah.
I mean, he left a legacy.
I've got one more about God itself. I'm like a Sufi kind of Muslim, believe in God and all. And it says that Zafar आदमी उसको न जानिएगा वो कितना ही साहिब फहम व ज़का जिसे ऐश में याद खुदा न रही जिसे तैश में खौफ खुदा न रहा. It means that if the guy is scholarly, is knowledgeable, he has wisdom, but he's not a true man. If at time of prosperity he doesn't think of God, and when he's really angry, he's not afraid of God.
Yes.
So God plays a big role in my life. Thank you.
That was by the last Mughal emperor of India, who was deposed by the British and sent to Rangoon to die, and they killed all his children before they sent him out because they blamed him for the mutiny. So, Riaz, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You have shared with us. A journey.
Thank you.
I had known you before your journey began.
No, I didn't want to talk about my son as an attorney.
No,
he
no,
said, Dad, don't talk about yourself.
This
But
is
just some
beautiful.
myself.
I think a lot of good things.
Thank you.
We thank you. He mentioned about the longevity of the people who are Seventh-day Adventists. There are other religious groups also that they have a longevity, and I think they is attributed to good life and a chaste life and not too many indulgences. I'm sure you have known Seventh-day Adventists. I had known few, and they live their faith. And in their faith, there is no smoking, there's no drinking, there is no overindulging, no toxicants like coffee and other things. Now they introduce another element in that not only those things are important, but also because they pray a lot. Now, about the prayer, science is still out to give us a verdict about whether the prayer are effective or not. We believe they are. Many other religious groups believe they are. But if we leave the prayer aside, a good living, which you so beautifully explained, good living, I think good living is not only to avoid sugars or carbohydrates, but as Dr. Chaudhary said beautifully, also control yourself. If somebody shouts at you, you don't have to shout back, right?
That's true.
But you used to shout back.
No.
And he talked about that.
I did.
No, I think it was a very good journey that you shared with us, and I thank you very much. So, prayers are
136.
136. Okay. Anybody has any other comments? This is now free for all.
I
Saleh?
just want to be proud of my personal doctor for the last 45 years. I just want to make this remark to share it with you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
for taking care of
I've been very fortunate. I've taken a lot of